The biggest part of the vision is to make sure that we're leveraging our relationships in the sense where Haiti can actually lead its own path forward and its own agenda, and we're supporting. But for us to get there, we have to actually address the bigger causes that got Haiti to where it is right now. The security issues that we're having, the heart of the security issue, which is the guns that are coming out of the United States, going into Haiti. And once in Haiti, it goes throughout the entire Caribbean. So making sure that we're passing legislation to actually stop guns going into Haiti is imperative, but also making sure we have a real mission on the ground to help and protect Haitians from the gangs, because the gangs have just been really dominating in certain areas and terrorizing people for so long. And so we have to address that if we're going to have any kind of real economic stability in the area. And in the US right now, we hear a lot of conversations about immigration and who's coming into the country. But we have to realize that dealing with the root issues is the only way we're going to actually stop immigration.
Do you think Congress at the moment can do more, or what steps do you think Congress can help the US government to actualize your vision for Haiti?
Well, Congress definitely could do more. We've seen the most dysfunctional Congress ever in this 118th session. That was led by Republicans who have not been able to rule, pass, or even make sure we're getting bills that help us actually thrive and stay open. We've been close to a shutdown, 3 times already with Republican leadership. We've never had Congress like this. So that internal civil war with the Republican Party has really stopped us from doing the work we have to do internationally and even reauthorizing important bills. And anytime I talk about Haiti, I always talk about Haiti and Africa together, because if I compare the two, I think there's a lot of similarities there when you're trying to have emerging governments, emerging countries who are looking to attain democracy through very difficult circumstances. And a lot of what I'm seeing, the international world has been trying to impose this standard that's not realistic for the post-colonized world. And when you keep making these policies, you're setting up these countries for failure. And so there's a lot we can do, including leveraging our diaspora. And I think that's one of the first steps that we have to do. One of the things I complain about constantly is when I go, I travel a lot for foreign affairs. When I go into countries in Africa, why is my face the only Black face there? So that tells me the cultural competency to deal with that country isn't present. Because for it to be present, we should have an ally, diaspora member. If we're in Ghana, we need to have a Ghanaian American person sitting there and saying, hey, this is how we implement, this is how we go forward, so we could be cognizant in a respectful way to work with the country. But when you bring people from, the Midwest and you ship them over to Ghana and now you're telling people what to do, there's a disconnect there, right? You can't even have an honest conversation. So there is a lot we could do more, and we have to seize on every opportunity to do that, especially right now with the changing global context.
Now, you mentioned Africa, so let's look at the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, popularly known as AGOA, which expires next year. As you are aware, stakeholders have been calling for its renewal. What is your position on that, and do you think it should be renewed?
Absolutely. I think my biggest position, you mentioned vision. This should not be an issue. The conversation shouldn't be whether or not we're actually passing AGOA. The conversation needs to be, it's automatically passed and reauthorized. And quite frankly, AGOA isn't enough. When we're looking at what AGOA actually does, AGOA is dealing with sub-Saharan Africa, when right now, if you're looking at Africa and African countries, they're looking more at a transcontinental trade agreements, right? So we're still behind on that, right? We're still classifying and looking at one segment in which Africa and Africans look at themselves in the continent. So I think we should be focusing on expanding it. The second thing also that we should be looking at is how do we actually deal with the barriers to doing trade in Africa? And those barriers, every business I talk to, it's always about the hesitation about financial instability, right? So we have to deal with that barrier realistically. And I'm happy to say that this administration has made sure that DFC was able to invest in Africa and provide loans and funding up 60%. That's a huge increase, right? Because that is a barrier. A second thing that we have to do to kind of make people a little less anxious when dealing with Africa, because the funding sources sometimes might be tough, we also have to incentivize companies to not just work with Africa in one state. What that means, traditionally, you'll see people who want to go do work in Africa, and they always look at it from an AIDS lens, right? What aid could we bring to Africa? When you're looking at the 1.6 billion people who are in Africa and the commodity of being like $2.7 trillion, we have to encourage American companies to do business in Africa and actually go into different segments.